Charles Coleman is a civil rights attorney and former prosecutor, and he joins us here in our New York studio. Charles, it's good to see you.
Hi, Debbie.
And it's unfortunate it's under these circumstances. Explain to me how, in view of a video taken by a bystander that shows the police officer taking Eric Garner down, he even says, "Leave me alone, I don't want you to bother me,"
right.
And then the medical examiner ruling his death a homicide. How can a grand jury possibly come back with no true bill or a non-indictment?
Sure. I think the first thing that people have to realize is just because the medical examiner did declare this a homicide, that doesn't mean that someone was criminally liable. And I think that that's the key into what the grand jury had to decide. People have been saying, well, it was a homicide. What's there to talk about? This is open shut. That's actually not the case. The question that the grand jury had to decide was, now that there was a determination made that Eric Garner was killed, was someone criminally responsible for it? And ultimately they decided no. With respect to the video, at this point, we don't even know if the video was actually shown to the members of the grand jury. Sure, it was, promulgated throughout social media, all over the internet, on YouTube, etc. But in terms of what evidence was presented by the prosecutor to that grand jury, we don't even know if that video was actually included.
Because it is, in fact, a secret process. Right. I want you to tell me a little bit more about the legal terminology of homicide. Legally, what does homicide mean, and how is it different than from murder? Because I think that's what people think in their head.
Well, first of all, from the medical examiner's point of view, when they use the term homicide, what they are basically saying is that he died not of his own hands. He was killed. And that was something that we knew. The question that the grand jury had to decide was, if there was someone who was criminally responsible, what were they criminally responsible for? So there are different, and that is going to vary with respect to degrees of intent. So murder one, for example, is the highest level of intent. It indicates that there was a premeditated intention to cause the loss of life for Eric Garner. So with respect to the varying homicide statutes under murder, all of them basically go up and down based off of the intent of the person who's responsible for killing the victim.
Talk to us a little bit about the demographics of Staten Island and some of the historical, political nuances here.
With Staten Island, it is overwhelmingly populated by families of those who are civil servants, many of whom are members of the FDNY, the fire department, as well as New York Police Department. And so when you talk about the grand jury, it is quite possible that the allegiance that these families feel with one another in terms of being a relatively insulated community and feeling like, hey, we're the only ones who really understand that we send our loved ones out to work every day and have to really worry about whether they're going to come back safely. That sort of allegiance and camaraderie may have, in fact, played a role in terms of whether this grand jury was willing to indict Eric Garner. Eric Garner's killer.
Yeah, right. Which would be Daniel Pantaleo.
Right.
So we showed a live picture from Times Square. People are already gathering in protest of this non-indictment, just like people gathered in protest in Ferguson, Missouri. Are there some dots to be connected between these two cases, Michael Brown and Eric Garner?
Absolutely. I think that there's a conversation that we need to really press forward on with respect to how communities of color are over-policed and the level of threat that is exercised and the level of threat that is perceived by members of law enforcement when it comes to interacting with males of color. You talk about what the Attorney General, Eric Holder, had to say earlier this week in Atlanta. It seems like he recognizes it. Even President Obama, with respect to his pushing of body cameras for officers around the country, there's a clear recognition and acknowledgement that these events are connected. And in fact, when it comes to the way that law enforcement interacts with communities of color, there needs to be a serious re-examination of what is done and how it is done.
And perhaps because of these two in a cumulative way, meaning Michael Brown and Eric Garner, this might push forward this conversation about requiring these body cameras on law enforcement officials.
Well, Debbie, one can only hope. I mean, the other side to it is that people have often theorized that because Pantaleo wasn't indicted, because Wilson wasn't indicted, all this does is only encourage officers who may want to be extra aggressive with men of color to be emboldened and to do it even more because there's no consequence. Darren Wilson was basically sent home on paid leave. Pantaleo at one point was basically sent on modified duty until his badge and his gun was taken, and now he's free to become a New York Police Department officer all over again. So one would hope, but when you talk about body cameras, even though we don't know whether the video actually went in, there was a video here, and Pantaleo was not indicted. So, there is sort of the optimist approach that things will get better and that this dialogue will ultimately lead to things changing. But I do understand that there are those who really question it and are skeptical of that.
So what are the legal options then for Eric Garner's family?
Well, there is an investigation that's going on internally with respect to NYPD, and there may be a federal investigation that takes place. We don't know what will come of it, but they also have civil remedies if they want to pursue this matter in civil court with respect to a wrongful death action. That is possible and perhaps on the horizon.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does feel like deja vu all over again. All right, Charles Coleman, as always, great information. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Debbie.
We'll see you again.